We have an exciting guest for you guys today. Paul Woolmington is a veteran media and advertising and comms leader and the CEO and founding partner at Canvas Worldwide, the second largest independent agency in the United States, a creative-driven global media and communications agency known for its innovative and multicultural focus. Paul has over 25 years in the industry. He's previously co-founded Naked Communications America and the Media Kitchen, building a reputation for redefining traditional marketing and media strategy. He's been recognized by Fast Company as one of the 10 most creative and innovative people in the marketing and advertising industry. He champions diversity, creativity, and integration across media, brand, and digital platforms, and has held senior roles at major global holdcos and serves as an advisor and advocate on industry boards, while frequently speaking on the advertising and data-driven storytelling industry. Paul, thanks so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you, Dylan. Thank you for inviting me. That was very generous of you. I think we can end the interview now.
Well, hey,
I'm joking, of course.
You do have a long and storied bio, and I'm sure there's quite a bit out of there, quite a bit of nuance and detail that I left out. But I know off camera we talked about your background, which I found absolutely fascinating. You visited over 104 countries in your life. You was born in South Africa, but you're not a South African. You're an Englishman. So I would love to start out with a little bit of where'd you grow up, where'd you go to school, and how did you get into the industry?
Yeah, thank you so much. I had an academic father who was actually a farmer's son, married a nurse. My mother, who actually was originally born in Sri Lanka. So a little bit of a mongrel background, mostly English, Anglo-Saxon. Yes, as you say, really quickly born in South Africa because my father was working there. There was a big university in Kampala, Uganda, so he lectured there. So I grew up some of my early years there. Then London, when I went to school. I was a dropout out of university, very proud of it. Multiple years later, I became a senior fellow at Columbia University on transformative storytelling. So there was a kind of, my mum who was very upset when I didn't complete my university years. A bit like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates for that matter.
Yeah, totally. Seems to be a trend nowadays.
Yeah, I know. She was very happy, but I think she thought Columbia was the country, not this Ivy League college in the Upper West Side of New York City. Anyway, she was so sweet. And then, yes, advertising. I wanted to be a journalist, but actually ended up at the agency that handled all of Rupert Murdoch's business. Shows how naive we were back then. I thought, oh, well, that's great. I'll take this job. That's another story. But thinking that I could hop across and become a journalist, either broadcast journalist or a journalist. But I never looked back. I loved the industry. I loved the polymath in me allowed that itch to be scratched. I loved culture, media, obviously communication. And I was lucky that I progressed really fast. It's a meritocratic industry. I've always found our industry, generally speaking. And then I was co-running a advertising agency group, and we had a media arm. I was then hired by IPG Interpublic, and that brought me to the States. And although I have this English accent, I am now longest stretch is the US and fully fledged American. Maybe an English. What's the Sting song? An Englishman in New York. Now an American with a funny accent in New York. And never looked back. So yes, Y&R Public, created the Media Edge, which is now part of, I think it's called Wavemaker or WPP Media,
yeah.
in one of the 15 subsequent iterations. And then luckily had a really lovely event when Martin Sorrell bought our group and then created the first of 3 startups. But, that's a long-winded update, but really proud of what we're doing at Canvas. We launched it 10 years ago. It's our 10th anniversary.
Congratulations. That's a big year.
Really scaled the business, but scaled the business with a heart. We're mission-based, really pride ourselves in culture and people, but obviously supported by, the latest and greatest. I would say competitive against anybody and everybody on our tech stack, on our use of AI. But the anecdote I was telling you was that this week it came up that a big consultant said it's kind of refreshing that instead of you leading with tech and ending with tech, you led with people and then you supported it with all the requisite, power tools that you need.
I love that. I think last year kind of felt like the hype cycle of AI where everybody was talking about it, but nobody was really telling anybody about what they were actually doing with it and what the practical applications were for. And I felt like Possible was kind of an inflection point where, if the direct to consumer revolution launched the opportunity for there to be 50 challenger brands in a category, AI means now you can have 1,000 brands in a challenger category because the floor or the playing field is getting lowered even more. I think that you will have to have a brand that people know and people care about in order to stand out in the future, probably more than ever. It seems like an agency, you guys are really leaning into the human piece and the creativity piece. We talked a little bit about how you guys are really strongly wanting to understand how the American audience thinks and behaves outside of the 2 coasts that, we can sometimes get stuck in. And, it's hard for a 24-year-old media planner sitting in New York to understand the nuances of the entire US. So it sounds like that pitch went really well, but I would love for you to maybe unpack that first point, that idea that, have we reached peak AI and are we kind of on the seesaw? Are we on the way back to, creativity and people and AI being a tool versus, the end all be all?
I think we just got to get used to the messiness. I have a lot of sympathy to what you say, that hype cycle, the noise. I call it the noise. Everyone now is a .ai. And in truth, so just a segue into this, an incredible ex-colleague of mine, a partner, is Noah Breyer, and Noah runs a company called Brand, BRXND, and we've done a number of conferences. He's put them on in New York, in Los Angeles, and I've spoken at them. And the one thing, it's obviously all around AI. It's around the creative application, the organizational, but the one rule is, firstly, no panels. And the second rule is you can only really talk about work you're doing or how you're doing it, or, the path to adoption and operationalization, because you're right. The hype cycle was a gazillion panels. Now, there are more panels at Cannes and Possible than there are people at Possible. And guess what? The majority were obviously, so I think the signals in the noise, from my perspective, are we're going to have parallel paths of the noise. That's not going to go away. But I think that what we're really seeing in 2026 and beyond is the operationalization of AI, very specific user case studies, very specific applications, and they are vast in internal, external, at all points of the journey, so to speak, and understanding and organizing it, but also underpinning it by training a workforce of the future. So we can talk about all these tools and technologies, and they are often the lead, but what's forgotten in the analysis is there are large swathes of human beings that will operate within or side by side with co-pilots, and I use that word very carefully. And we have to train for that future. So I would say our budget at Canvas has doubled because we are leaning into what leadership means in a tech and AI age. And I think that's going to be an omnipresent skill set, a universal skill set, but that's a transitional skill set, fast transition, by the way, and then everything that sits underneath it. So what, Stanford University did a huge study, and they said somewhere in the region of 70 to 80% of what you had learned in the past will not make you succeed in the future. So you kind of see, this complete new workforce, you completely new a way that you're going to use tools, but they're going to be driven by humans. The companies that will make the difference will be the companies that understand the operationalization. And I can talk. Let me pause there, but I can definitely talk about how we're operationalizing it, how we're educating, how I'm trying to simplify what could be a very complex topic as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. I would love for you to maybe get into the details a little bit, as much as you can share, on maybe the top way that you think AI is transforming specifically the media industry. Because I've seen examples in creative where it's like, okay, we can do storyboarding, we can do proof of concepts, we can even create spec films to show the client. So we're not bringing them a deck or a mood board or pictures. We're bringing them, a sample ad before we go out and shoot it. And then in the planning phase, now you're able to hoover up all this data and drive insights a lot faster than when you used to have to do focus group or panels. What would you say is the most practical application of AI within the media industry? Is it, helping with planning? Is it optimization? What would you say is the best use case that you've seen so far?
Yeah, let me take a step back.
Sure.
A fantastic series of illustrations, and we've embraced a lot of that because obviously living in an atomized content world, there really isn't as much a division as there used to be between quote unquote sort of a traditional creative agency did and what a progressive media agency does. But let me just take a step back, and I think I've organized really our thinking around something that I think my mum could even understand, and I think it's just the 3 H's, and it's hero, hub, and hygiene. And just to really explain each of them, hero AI applications, I think, will solve big business problems, internal, external. So I call them, you put a lot more effort into them. There might be interconnectivity between different agents, between different applications, or they could solve a very specific client problem or a universal problem within the advertising industry. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Ad Exchanger gave us Best in Show this year for AI work we did, where we were able to, what I called, clean up the internet, in the sense that we all acknowledge there's a lot of gray, low interest click in the ecosystem of digital. So what we did was we created an algorithm that really understood Zillow's, so Zillow, obviously the big client of ours, understood obviously the audience we were after, obviously the stage in life they might be in, dreaming to buying or renting a home. But the overlay where the AI hero application was that we only wanted to be in high engagement environments. So we built that, and heretically we paid a premium. So the hypothesis was much richer content, and the contact point that we can align against it, that those moments, pay a premium and see how we can do brand and performance at the same time. We blasted the metrics. So it was, on a performance basis, it was performing better than the averages by miles. But we were in very, very high engagement environments where you get, engagement at the brand level as well. So there's a hero application. So that's an illustration of obviously the work that we're very specifically doing to solve problems. Now that is a universal problem. Supply chain for clients is a universal problem. We're sometimes advertising in the wrong market with the wrong product at the right time. How do we actually figure that out in a much more immediate, always on? Another tool we built, which is we applied it for one of our amazing clients, Genesis Luxury Cars. But the underpinning of the AI work that we did is universal to anyone who's got a supply chain issue, and the feedback loops often have not caught up with this AI digital age where everything's immediate, and yet your information is coming in, or by the time you apply that, or maybe you're not even applying it. Many media agencies are not wired into sales systems that allow you to actually really dynamically understand. So that's another big hero application that I feel like is solving a business problem and generating outcomes that are higher performing, but also maybe closing the gap between this kind of historical upper funnel versus lower funnel. I think we should be able to do both elegantly, roughly at the same time. Hubs are really, so a hub could be a piece of technology, big partners where you want to apply your AI. So a hub might be Microsoft, which might be an operating system. So how do we work? So we've actually built Ella on top of Copilot, which is actually enabling my teams to work dynamically, integrate all of that great stuff, integrate with clients, do things much faster. Obviously, the day-to-day operating system powered by something that is customized to our industry, but actually sits. Other hubs are going to be Amazon, Google, Meta, big places that we are going to at scale activate. So I call those the hubs. And of course, hygiene takes up an inordinate amount of conversation, whether it's an analyst or whether it's a Wall Street. How do we make our how do we operationalize what would otherwise be rote work, or how do we operationalize making our work more effective and efficient, not just cheaper? And how do we then reinvent the agency client brand relationship where we become the trusted advisor, where we are using judgment against AI in order to drive outcomes, data storytelling and everything else. So those are illustrations along the way. So it could be applications in programmatic, which actually, by the way, AI and algorithms were always a part of the media life. They were just right.
It was called machine learning back then, I think, right?
Of course, machine learning and LLMs. And I mean, we're just taking it to that next era. So what's been wonderful, I think, seeing the Canvas team really feeling quite native already. And actually, there's been less, in my opinion, of the muscle memory that I think is much talked about in the industry, because we've created a safe environment. We have a very, very strong culture. We have no greed, ego, or turf. So I think we just allow people to feel. We do a One Canvas Awards, and we had 80 submissions, 80 teams. Every single discipline, including our finance department, came up with ideas and applications and illustrations of what we call challenging the comfortable. Not all of them were AI driven, by the way. It wasn't an AI competition, but many were hygiene, in hubs, hero. And that's the way that you don't just set up 10 people in a corner and say, you're going to be our skunk works for AI. It needs to be owned, operated. There needs to be reciprocity between the technology and the people. And I think that's the Copilot analogy. That's why I love how Microsoft has co-opted that idea. But I think it really is. You have somebody who's going to help you not crash. In really bad weather, you can have it there as your co-pilot, but it's still, at this point, I don't think I'm going to get in an airplane without a pilot.
Yeah, I think
maybe Elon's working on that one.
Yeah. Well, those cars around LA scared me at first, but they
Oh yeah, the
seem to
Waymos, the
be,
Waymos,
yeah, the
yeah.
Waymos. They're seeming to work pretty good so far.
No,
So,
that's right. Yeah,
you're,
sorry.
you're the.
I hope that helped you.
Oh yeah, no,
The
definitely. I
organizing
think
principle. I gave you some illustrations and amazing partners that we're bringing in as well. So I like to emphasize in this world, it's big partners like Microsoft and Google and Amazon, and we're thick with all of those, but also elegant partners who are really helping us build that next generation of applications, which some are exclusive to Canvas, and some I think we're co-creating, and I think applying across more and more industries. So that's how you operationalize it. It doesn't live as a soundbite. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
I love it. I think those were great examples and very tangible. So thank you for walking me through that framework.
Yeah.
Um, Something you mentioned that I've heard in a few conversations recently is the idea that brand and performance can be basically in the same bucket. It doesn't have to be, your hero campaign, your Super Bowl campaign, your brand campaign driving awareness up here, and then performance, last click media at the bottom. They can actually work within the same funnel. The best brand execution should also drive performance. It shouldn't be a disparate, practice or channel or campaign. I love that idea that you guys really were able to use AI to optimize that in the context of Zillow, because, I think about the work that I tried to do for many years in the influencer marketing space with, home buying or real estate in general. And the biggest thing that we would run up against is, well, how are you going to find an influencer to work with one of these companies when they're actually buying a home? So you could do an authentic storytelling piece. So can you talk about, that idea of like performance and brand working together to kind of find those, I think you mentioned high engagement opportunities to really drive both of those outcomes at the same time? And what would be a good example of one for, say, like a Zillow? Or you could use another client as an illustration.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And again, I always like giving a little bit of context. Apologies in advance, but I think so.
Please.
What we have is we have a process that's all about outcomes. So ultimately, we start with that nerdy kind of management consultant. What is the ultimate goal? And then obviously think of every contribution of outcome across a journey, internal and external. So the customer journey, but also the internal journey. A truth is that as media fragmented, so did measurement. Everybody has a means to justify their existence, essentially, if you think of the world we live in today. The answer is Google, Amazon, NBC, Snap, influencer, whatever it is. Now, what was the question? So I think in that bottom-up world, how do you actually put a framework? So you have outcomes. You've got to respect every discipline. So obviously, an internal search department, their KPI is going to be search, isn't it? I mean, everything around search. If you've got a social team, what's the KPI? It's going to be social. But how do you knit it all together? Because nothing works in a vacuum, unless you're a startup brand where maybe only using, one-dimensional media. And I don't mean that in a, your budgets won't flex, but everyone uses, multiple techniques. So what we've done is we have this outcomes roadmap powered by data storytelling. Data storytelling is going to be the new discipline of the 21st century because we are awash in independent bottom-up measures that don't connect. So we need AI now overlaid into traditional measures, MMMs, MTAs, attribution, incrementality, but driven by people that understand the techniques, but can relate each of these contributions to the whole. Because, of course, that last click gains all the benefit of everything else the brand has been doing. And then obviously we're smarter than that now, and Google and Amazon are full funnel omni-channel. But in the old days, Google would take 100% credit. In fact, if they could, they'd take 150% credit.
And they'd charge you for it too.
As would many others. I'm not just picking on Google, but I'm just saying that CPA or whatever it was took credit for everything else. So how do you obviously, and of course, I think it's, and I don't mean this overly derogatory, but I think it's lazy thinking in a recession or when things are tough, just to go for that. You sacrifice the brand, you really sacrifice, as you said, in an age where brand differentiation is going to be slowly eroded by a new set of competitors, a new set of technology enabling tools for consumers and services and all the rest of it. What's going to be the thing it's going to be, yes, I want a compelling business proposition, final click. I do want to convert that, and that's obviously critical to the business outcome, but you need to understand. So the data storyteller is going to be the 21st century new discipline that's going to really be the narrator and the Sherpa that can actually contribute. So we call ourselves a full funnel performance mindset agency, because I also took objection to suddenly the emergence in the last decade, 15 years of performance or growth agencies. Well, I'm a growth agency. I the growth of my clients, but I look at everything in its contribution to growth, not just what I'm doing in Meta and what my little algorithm in getting a cheaper CPA or whatever it is the contribution. So I think the data storytelling is this new. So we put analytics at the heart of the organization. We're training all our business leads to understand incrementality, to understand techniques. They won't go as deep as our data scientists, but in combination, what we have with clients now is a roadmap where we are working with the clients. And by the way, working with lots of different stakeholders within a client organization or even within our organization. So educating people in each of the different disciplines as to what sits to the left and the right of them or in complement with them. And I think that's the issue. You know, the issue today is I guarantee you within a client organization, you ask the same question of 5 of the discipline leads, you'll get 5 different answers.
That's funny. No, I love it. Well, I think that's
great. By the way, I respect every one of those. I'm not trying to blame them because every one of them in their discipline is doing what is right within the discipline. But that's where you need then the CMO, the chief strategy officer, chief growth officer, chief performance mindset officer, whatever you want to call it. And in our case, it's a combination of performance mindset with data storytelling to join all the dots. But what is so fantastic and what's leveling the playing field is there are all these new attribution companies that have been created. There's now a new arms race to replace or to, at the moment, layer on top of our traditional historical ways of measuring. Now, I don't advocate chucking the baby out the bathwater. I think you can actually run them parallel, but I actually see a future where that new merger, there'll probably be, new models will emerge that might answer the $64,000 question, which is, could we have, a universal measurement tool? At the moment, what we're calling it is a unified measurement framework. And that's, so it's unifying the disparate elements. So it is actually more complicated than you would otherwise think, because again, a lot of companies appease the CFO, or the CFO feels most comfortable in a world where I just have this very neat dashboard that sits at the bottom of and really that's, in my opinion, a race to the bottom.
Yeah, because the minute that
long term, and I get it, quarterly earnings are short term, and you've got to perform every quarter, otherwise, a CEO is not going to be in his job for that long. But that's why you have to do both at the same time. It isn't, oh well, I'm going to be in, I'm going to sacrifice this for this. I think we live in a digital age where you can, and the illustration earlier with the work that we did with Chalice, actually, I've got to give them a shout out. Chalice, we worked really closely with, we built this algorithm together and we applied it to Zillow. And without over repeating that case study, that was performance and brand at the same time. And it performed on both metrics, which to my way of thinking, is what we should be. Now, you can't elegantly do that all the time. But I see Disney on stage at CES talking about technology and application of new data, clean rooms. We've done clean room tests with NBC and Google, where we've been literally looking at that way in which what would traditionally be called brand medium is a performance medium at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. It's the idea of this data Sherpa or this data storyteller, being that person who can look at disparate amounts of data and be able to say, what components of the marketing plan contributed and for how much. And then the other thing that I think a lot of brands don't look like is that not all acquisitions are equal, right? Like, what if that acquisition drives a customer that spends 3 times as much money over the next 6 months? Just the cost of acquiring them, that's just the start of the relationship. That's not the whole relationship. So I love that.
And it's so funny. You pick up. I mean, I'm so blessed. At Young Rubicam, I worked and got to meet people like Lester Wonderman, who was the creator of direct marketing. He created a group called Wonderman, which is, sadly one of those other brands that have gone by the wayside. But what was at the heart of it? It used to be above and below the line. Do you remember that idea of this is below the line and this is above the line? And it was, now we don't think of that in a digital age, but obviously these techniques. But where I was coming from was just to complement your point. Long-term customer value, that was one of the metrics that was a wonderful mathematical thing that you were working on in a direct marketing below the line agencies. That's what they did. That was their performance metric. What is the long-term value? Now, we have disintermediation. Customers are more fickle. They have the ability to jump, to switch. There's less stickiness because of technology. But it's still evolved. I totally agree with you. We also, in this age, we always used to say there was churn. There was always this group of people that were always looking for the offer. And now there are more of them because there's more techniques to save money, to switch. So how do you create long-term brand affinity while at the same time generating revenue?
Yeah, totally. Or you create a stickiness like these guys where you can't leave even if you wanted to, right?
You got it. I'm handcuffed to my Apple system. I know it drives my IT group because we're mostly Microsoft, and I'm a total iOS user.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned you're a proud college dropout, much like some of those other entrepreneurs that you quoted, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and the others. In a world where college is becoming more and more expensive, and the tooling for the new economy is becoming a lot more hands-on versus maybe liberal arts, oriented. You, as a CEO, would you consider hiring someone that didn't go to university if they had the right skill set and the right capabilities and the right resume and the right attitude? What is your thoughts on, the value of college for the next generation of the workforce coming up right now?
Well, I'll try and be pithy and not go on too many soliloquies, but yes, I absolutely would, and always have, in every, and maybe it was the way that I was hardwired. I had an incredible academic father who was quite brilliant. He was a farmer's son, but he spoke multiple languages, scientist, wrote books. He was immisced with me. I'm a bit scrappier. Some of his genes, I think, passed on. But what I think, the point, I'll try and weave this together. So really starting, I think the workplace of the future is going to be, I'm not sure that the education system is fully geared to how people will work in the future. I think they are struggling with obviously institutional reputations, legacy, endowments, political considerations. Being a principal of a university is probably one of the toughest jobs at the moment, because you really are changing the airplane engines while it's in flight. But it's a slow process. Tenured professors, things like this, the hierarchy of schools. So at Columbia, I was blessed to have engaged with the business school. So although I did drop out of college many years ago, myself and a really good friend, Frank Rose, created a curriculum, and we were sponsored by the business school, the School of Arts, and very lightly by the data sciences group. But we were really talking about transformative storytelling. And I use it as a leitmotif of what I think is interesting in education. It's these pivots, the inflection points between different disciplines where I think magic happens in strategy, but it's where I think jobs of the future might. So I'm involved with Columbia University, even though I don't lecture and I'm not a senior fellow anymore, because I have a full-time job. I am actually part of the Committee for Global Thought, and actually we have people that can come and join Columbia and do what I call a meta masters, where they can actually create their own program. And then Columbia will put together the right schools and disciplines and deans that can support those ideas. So those ideas are coming from the real world either careers or real world problems that young, bushy-eyed, is that what you call it? Bushy-tailed, sorry, bushy-tailed, the wide-eyed and bushy-tailed.
There we go.
People are saying, you know what, actually, this is what I would really love to do, and Columbia responding in a great way. My daughter goes to Brown, and it's been one of the fuzzy colleges where you can make up your own, and so she did one of the courses she's been doing is AI and ethics. I love it. It's this intersection of, what are the ethical implications of AI? So obviously understanding the algorithms, deeply understanding LLMs, but understanding about, and trying to raise the concern about bias in the LLMs. And of course that is talked about. But it's not the first thing that we talk about when we're talking about value creation in an AI world. So yeah, back to the question, I love that. And by the way, I think a workforce should, especially in agencies, should be representative of this great country of ours. So, I'm long kind of bored with people walking around aged 60 with a Harvard t-shirt on. I mean, get a life. You did 4 years there. Or maybe you just did a refresher course and you bought the t-shirt and that's defined you. No, what you're going to do tomorrow, what you did yesterday, that's going to define you. And so I've jumped around a bit. Workforce, that's why we have, I think, over 50% of our staff describe themselves as something other than white. We have incredible diversity. We actually have a unit called Navigation Boulevard that leads Hispanic strategy for McDonald's. We don't do the media buying for it. We're hardwired into the McDonald's system, and we work cheek by jowl with them, because if they don't win the multicultural audience, they don't win the growth war. And so all of those things, I think, can only happen if you're open-minded to hiring people from every walk of life, giving them the foundation and creating the safety and culture for them to excel. And having a degree at Yale, it's so funny, I think most of the Yale graduates seem to, what do? They prep other kids trying to get to Yale. That's the career. I always found it amusing that you had these kind of multiple, highly pedigreed degrees, and, parents would say, yeah, they're prepping they're 32 and they're working to get my kid into Yale. I go, oh, that's quite interesting. That's symbiotic.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I saw.
Look, I've got nothing against Yale, by the way.
Well, it's funny you mentioned them by name, because literally before I logged into this interview, I saw something come across my Facebook feed where a study was conducted that 98% of all donations from Yale faculty and or administrators go to the Democratic Party, and 100% of the faculty and administrators identify as Democratic, which is, fine to be one-sided in being an institution. But, how do you, when you're working in a discipline like media, and when you're working for any type of brand that wants to get more than half the country as a customer, you need to understand the motivations of both sides, right?
Yeah, no, I don't want to get overly drawn into it, but I think,
right.
Critical thinking means that you can listen to all points of view, and you should. We're living in a democratic, society means that all voices should be heard. At the extremes, I completely understand at the extremes, but how do you adjudicate what's at the extreme? But what you're not doing as a college is endorsing. You should be neutral, and you should be allowing all voices. And unfortunately, yes, and from a marketing perspective, you have to keep a neutral hat, because we are commercial creativity, commercial application of marketing techniques. So, I think that's right. But also, that's also saying plurality means that you have, and you can respect different voices while still creating a safe environment. It's a delicate balancing act, but listen, and just get on another hobby horse. We're very, very big in sport, but sport is, in my view, the new religion, and it's the leveler. You can be a Kansas City fan, and you can be in that stadium, maybe this year mourning your losses and your quarterback that's going to have an ACL. But you know what? You could be from any walk of life. That's what I've absolutely loved about sport. The fandoms and sport collectives. It unifies. It's kind of like the new church. I mean, as churches and or as religions slightly wane, I don't mean it in a heretical way. By the way, I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm just saying that sport is that one level.
Well,
it's that one time we can share things. It's that one time we can hug people. It's the one time we can talk, and we've got common ground, and you can break common ground. I think, and I do like what a lot of the sports leagues are doing. Roger Goodell at the NFL, for obviously many of the causes to realizing the role that sports teams play in their communities, how sports stars should be role models in a world where, we don't have many models. We distrust politicians. We distrust so many people. We've been let down by so many people. And of course, we get let down by sports stars. We're all human, but, they are... I think it's just such an interesting topic. We do all these sports reports. We've been really looking into the psychology of fandoms. If you're a fan, you're more likely to be happy. You're more likely to have a larger social group. If you're more, positive outlook, you often are open to other ideas. This is in the aggregate, and of course, it's and what's the 800-pound gorilla in the media marketplace? Sport.
Yeah. Well, on that note, do you guys have any Super Bowl campaigns coming up in a couple of weekends here?
Well, you're supposed to keep this all secret, so I might get fired for letting you know. I would say yes, we are very active. We are active in the bowl for our clients, and not wishing to, because as being a social maven, the activation and the hoopla, and when you release your
of course,
spot,
I won't put you on the spot.
Yes, yeah, we're very active in FIFA World Cup at the global level, at the national level, Olympics. Actually, the Canvas team worked on the LA bid, with the Wasserman Group.
Oh, yeah.
And
Wasserman's
it was
the
actually
chairman,
in our,
right?
yeah. Casey is the chair of the LA 2028, and of course it was 2024, and then Paris. There was an accommodation. So that's really exciting. We're going to bring women's soccer. The FIFA Women's World Cup will come to America. I mean, it's interesting. Everyone wants a slice of America. So because of obviously the scale and the brand and just the money. So I call it in, out, and out, in. So the out in is because we have so many streaming services, we have so much more access. What we're seeing is a depth and breadth of, it was always there, but it was hidden in plain sight. 20 years ago, there were kind of 4 networks, and therefore there were really 3/4 dominant American sports. Now it's, because we have digital channels, we have obviously, it's a complicated sports market, but what I would say is we're embracing more and more sports. Women's sport has been, I've been such an advocate of that and how that's been growing. And then the in out is obviously, the big American sports, number 1 NFL, number 2 NBA, 3 probably MLB, NHL, MLS, are going global, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, soccer interest is at an all-time high because we live in such a diverse country, but also, Premier League has kind of, everyone seems to have a La Liga team or a Argentinian team or an Italian team or, whatever it is that you kind of vicarious, not everyone, but certainly that's been popularized. I think FIFA will just bring that all together. All of those stars are going to be playing in our backyard. And I think that's going to be really great for opportunities, marketing opportunities, as well as, as well as I think fandoms, back to that fandom, we're but also the NFL, it just doesn't seem to, it's a juggernaut, isn't it? We're all excited. Maybe one day there might be a London team, who knows? I mean, if the Rams can go to St. Louis and back to LA, no, I'm not suggesting. I think the Cronkies, by the way, the Cronkies own my team, Arsenal. They own the Denver Nuggets. They own the Colorado Rapids. They own the LA Rams. Talk of these, also the business of sport is getting so interesting.
Yeah, well, I interviewed the tourism minister of Sao Paulo, and they were very, very excited to talk about the fact that they had NFL, down in Sao Paulo, and talking the Rams, I think, did some exhibitions in Australia last year. So I think
right.
really
Each team has, the Rams have Australia. Each team has a geography.
Yeah.
I was talking to Tim Ellis, the CMO of the NFL, and he was going, because I think last year at the Super Bowl, they did these beautiful spots where they showed these teams in Ghana. I think it was Ghana, Senegal, and Australia. And you're right. I mean, they are. And of course, the NBA, we've got more international stars playing here in our backyard. So that's been fantastic. So, I used to play basketball in the UK. I didn't know anybody, but when it was cold, we came indoors and we played basketball. It was funny. I loved it. But I didn't know, but I bet you if you stop someone in London, they would know, who the big names were.
I love it. Well, let's talk a little about CES. We were both there last week trying to make this interview happen in person, and I'm glad we got to do the sit down because we got to do a little bit more time. But any key insights or predictions or themes that you are seeing coming out of CES yourself last week?
Well, obviously, even if you spent 4 days walking every one of the halls, you'd probably only see 1/100th of what was actually going on. Someone told me it was really bad. I took a left instead of a right, and I went into one of these halls, and it was agricultural technology and AI's use in the agro world. And obviously, that's a huge industry. Don't get me. I was just saying, where do you start and where do you stop? Obviously, one big theme is the humanoid, the robotics. And I'm blessed to work with Hyundai Group, and obviously I don't want to overlap with what was in the public domain, and anyone can just Google what Boston Dynamics were featuring and the humanoids and the manufacture of these and the implementation across many of their operations. It was exciting news. I think that's a big theme. Obviously, you're seeing that arms race. I mean, obviously, several years ago, it was obviously mobility. That still is a huge theme. I think Elon even announced a new subscription to the extra Tesla powered. Although California, where your lovely state, I think, are challenging his descriptor over whether or not this is truly autonomous. Without human at the human at the wheel. No, there's a lot. I mean, I think what's going to be interesting is observing immersive technologies that could bring product service directly into a phone, into your living room, where maybe you will see a future where there'll be less apps, maybe a future where there'll be less websites. We go to websites because, so this is a theme that I'm kind of playing with. I've seen some amazing technologies. There's an amazing technology called FLAM, F-L-A-M, and they're really building a application that can work to dynamically transform advertising, dynamically transform the retail experience without an app, where you can bring that experience, you can bring a product into your living room and you can buy it as well. You can have it three-dimensionalized. You can, so these are going to be kind of things that will disrupt, disintermediate, make even less friction. I think these are things that you look for the signals in the noise of, obviously, software and hardware. I'm kind of very intrigued. I didn't see anything, so I'm talking a little bit extracurricular. Well, obviously we've seen the Meta glasses. That partnership with Ray-Ban, I think, has been very, very interesting. Meta Labs, Google announcing that they're going to get back. I do remember
the glass.
In my social feed, I have the Google Glass 16 years ago, and saying something probably very profound. And if I go back, I'll be really embarrassed because I probably said, hey, this is going to be the form and function of the future. But again, it's just trying to think, will we see a future where, at the moment, these things are glued to our, hands, the extension of our lives. And, what could that form and function be in a virtual AR powered by AI, by LLMs, all integrated? I'm not quite sure I'm ready to have the chip inserted at the back of my head, but certainly, anything that will allow me not to have as many apps might be a really good thing. To have, how many passwords do you think you've got?
Oh my goodness, yeah, and forgetting them and getting locked out, and then you've got the the authentication layer on top of it. It's crazy.
Yeah. I thought it was really, you're kind of viscerally seeing the application of these technologies. A few years ago, we were obviously seeing autonomous cars in car parks at CES at Las Vegas. And now, as you said, it's very commonplace in Los Angeles or in maybe San Diego, but certainly San Francisco, and coming to New York increasingly is the Waymo car. So, that's not a vision of the future. That's going to be produced and manufactured at scale. And obviously with, and a very expensive technology, quite rightly, because we want these things to be mission critical. But I think the cost of that technology will slowly reduce. And, that's a visceral example of it. I remember my wife, we live in a loft, and we've had those vacuum robots for years. I mean, like
Oh
20
yeah.
years ago, and and they're still there. And I know there's like, well, it's round, and we don't have many corners here, so it's like perfect for our environment. That whole. I mean, but I actually would. I know that I probably live to regret saying this. I'd quite like a cute robot in my house. If you go to Seoul, literally you're at a restaurant, you're in the airports, and they're coming up, and they I don't know, it'd be quite fun. I'm sometimes quite lonely. I might need someone to kind of watch my favorite soccer team, and maybe just agree with me. I would program it just to agree with me. That would be. I'm joking. I'm off the reservation now. But
Well, I think you're right. I mean, we've allowed the robots in for simple tasks like vacuuming the floor. As the technology expands, how do they augment more and more, manual chores, so to speak, but then how do they then start interacting with us in ways that are social or agentic, in addition to the labor tasks that they're meant to replace?
So can you indulge me one moment? So
Please, yeah.
in the storytelling thing, we would do a lot of storytelling, and Frank was my partner was really, and myself loved science fiction and science fiction authors. And isn't it incredible how William Gibson and Isaac Asimov and, were prescient, Arthur C. Clarke, whether it's naming, whether it was, this vision of the future, Minority Report, that I mean, we have that now, and at CES it was a reality. We're working it, in this. It's so fascinating. This is much more anecdotal and what I would call just passion, just going and decoding it. And while we were talking about robots, sprung to mind is the Jetsons. Do you remember that? The Jetsons. That must be 60 years old. I mean, I have no idea. And there were the robots that were. I think she was the housemaid, and she tucked the kids into bed and did this and did that, and they had they're drone-like mobility vehicles and things like this. It's interesting. Yeah, I'm waiting for that book that kind of decodes all of the predictions, or not even predictions. They were just hypotheses. They were visions of the future and how they marry up to where we are today and where we might be in 5 years and 10 years time. I might have to dig out my old, William Gibson books and just, have a little reread.
I think a lot of them are definitely coming to pass for sure. So you're getting ready to head out to your next cultural moment, which is Sundance next week. Sundance has not only been a place for great filmmakers to come together to buy and sell films that go into the studio ecosystem, but you also have a lot of disruption at this moment. Netflix buying Warner Brothers, and Paramount having recently gone on for sale and was acquired by the folks behind Oracle. Kind of more disruption to the traditional filmmaking and movie landscape probably than any time in history before the decoupling of the studio regulations in the 80s. But also a pretty amazing time for brands to be in the business of making movies and making premium content. Whether you think about the paving the way of the F1 circuit here in America with the Drive to Survive series, of then pointing back to sport, or even a brand like Illy Coffee making a Academy Award winning documentary about the native tribe in Mexico and the indigenous regions of Mexico that make the coffee beans that supply their coffee stores. It feels like in a moment where there are more opportunities to opt out of advertising through subscription models or just avoid it through technology, brands making content that is meant to inspire, educate, or entertain versus be interrupted seems to be more present than ever. Is there anything that you are looking forward to seeing when you're out at Sundance next week that has been made or been participated in some way by a brand?
Yeah, I love going to Sundance. We were talking off camera. There are lots of parallel tracks there. So, I think you're involved in this. There's the storytelling track with obviously incredible people in front of, behind, utilizing new technologies, thinking of transformative storytelling. I'm fascinated by that topic. So obviously, it's a great forum where great, good people can come together, figuring out new business models and new ways of storytelling. I fundamentally believe that everything we learn as humans, our disposition, our lives are formed through story. And so that's a science and it's an art and everything in between. I think it was never seen as a science. It was seen as an art, but it is a science. I mean, it's scientifically proven that story can change people's minds. I mean, there's commercial storytelling and then there's storytelling. And, you know, the empathy that you can engage, character development, situations, transporting yourself into someone else's skin is something that story is at the heart of. And that's not just empathy and understanding, it's entertainment, it's all of the above. Yes, we're at incredible multiple crossroads, aren't we? I think storytelling's never been more vibrant. I'm such a half full person rather than a half empty. I think it's just figuring out the different forms of content. You know, I call it the periodic table of content. You know, it's a story world is made up of so many different techniques now. But one technique that I hope will continue to evolve is, you know, as I understand it, you know, IMAX is up double digits.
Yeah.
So a premium large screen experience is still so welcome. Going to a movie theater that feels welcoming, that doesn't have sticky floors, you know, some of those things.
Premium experience. Yeah,
you know, but sharing, being able to share an experience together. Yeah. So obviously Hollywood was the leveler, a bit like sport, where you can be in a theater collectively with other people, laugh together, cry together, hold hands, do things. You know, it's great, but we obviously, we need to go to that next level. I do think that, you know, really clever studios are doubling down on theatricals, understanding that the life they've now got is theatrical and plus streaming, plus, you know, long-term value of, and then the library, you know. Listen, some of these libraries, who would have ever thought that we'd be, I mean, I'm watching more oldies, you know, instead of being clicked into the latest Netflix thing that's so that I'll have forgotten tomorrow, go back and watch some of the greats. So yes, but you know, places like Sundance are a great crossroads of the new and the old. And of course, Indie Fair, great documentaries, great thoughtful. I'm really looking forward to the program and obviously meeting, you know, brands and activations and all of the above. And of course, it's the last year. It's quite sad. Park City last year. So somewhat not
the end of an era.
controversial. There was the big bid and it's going to go to Boulder, Colorado. And I've got friends in Boulder, so that'll be interesting. As you know, I mean, it would have been intriguing if Cincinnati had won the bid. You know, Sundance at Cincinnati doesn't have quite the same ring as, and God bless Cincinnati. I know it gets a bad rap, but I think you know what I mean. Moving from Park City, where, you know, Robert Redford, God rest his soul, you know, was created the foundation, and it's given back to Utah over the years, and you know, it's going to be. I think it's going to be bittersweet for Park City.
I think so.
All those people that bought their timeshare, and one of the primary reasons they did it was to be at Sundance. You know, I don't know.
Well, I guess
But
it's
life moves
a
on.
good
Life moves
point
on.
that nothing is permanent, in this fickle world these days.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Paul, fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you spending an hour with me and the audience today. If you could send folks to either connect with you directly or learn more about Canvas, where would you like to send folks?
Yeah, just please feel free via LinkedIn. You can get me on LinkedIn. I publish quite a lot of content, and certainly canvasworldwide.com. We've got lots of content there, so feel free to give us feedback and or engage. But yeah, Dylan, your work in this arena, in your on your professional side, all the activities you've done, but all your podcasts, your vidcasts are really fantastic. So thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Thank you, sir. And for those of you who are watching at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe. If you're listening to the show, a honest review is how we find a larger audience organically. And last but not least, if there's a brand marketer, somebody out there in agency land, or just somebody who you think would enjoy this fascinating conversation I had with Paul today about brand storytelling, don't forget to share the show. And with that, we will see you again very shortly. Thanks so much, Paul. Appreciate it.